Welcome back to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave. Thanks for being with me today, and I want to bring you a special interview. Another great guest that I had a chance to chat with, a pal of mine. His name's Dan Schlissel. He's got a great resume. You'll find out all about it, but he is the founder and also runs the comedy record label called Stand Up Records. He's been in that business for a quarter of a century. He also had a punk label before that. He's just a great guy. I know him from the Cartoonist Kayfabe group chat, as well as he has become a friend and a customer of my live comic sales. And I thought it would be a great piece of insight to talk to him about comedy, running a record label, getting started in doing punk records, producer, recording live shows, all the stuff that Dan, he takes part in. And it's his business. I do want to just say a special thank you for his patience. Recently, I started using a different recording program, and my internet was really not cooperating with it that night. So you'll see some editing done. Some will just be Dan talking. I kept cutting out. He didn't, but I kept cutting out. So just want to give that disclaimer, and once again, thank Dan for his extreme patience with the fact that I just kept disappearing from the stream, and it wasn't to offend him. But I think this conversation is a really enjoyable one, and we are going to do one again soon just because of all the problems. It threw me off my game. But you'll probably never notice it. I'm a professional. But you can follow Dan on Stand Up Records all across the platforms of social media. But check out the website if you really want to learn a little more and order a vinyl, or just check out some of the comedians he's worked with and still is working with. We're going to get into a different discussion eventually about collecting and art, because he has employed so many great artists to do album covers for his roster of comedians. Other than that, just want to say thank you to everybody who's been here and continues to come back. Just saw Superman last week and I absolutely loved it. And as of this recording, I'm 2 days away from seeing the new Fantastic Four movie, which I'm super excited for. Lots of stuff coming up down the pipeline, some interviews that are hopefully going to happen within the next calendar week. And if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, well, by the time you hear this, you'll have been there and come back. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I hope you bought me all the fun things. Don't forget to hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube, rate and review the podcast, yada, yada, yada. But let's just get to the meat of this Meat and Potatoes podcast, and that is Two Jews, One Podcast. My guest, Dan Schlissel of Stand Up Records. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever time of the day you're listening to it. Welcome to Direct Edition. Today, I have a special guest who's a pal, and I like talking to friends because then I'm not nervous, even though I'm always nervous. But today's guest is not just a record producer, but he is the founder and the head of Stand Up Records, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, comedy recording label out there, but also the second Grammy Award winner that I've interviewed, next to Todd McFarlane, and the only person I've ever interviewed to be a guest on Mark Maron's podcast, WTF. I'm talking to my pal, Dan Schlissel, from Stand Up Records, as well as the comic world. Dan, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Dave? I'm blushing from all the stuff you just said. It's all true, and yet it's just hard to hear.
Well, I think about me as the guy reading your resume, and you already have the job, so you're good.
True. Okay, well, thank you for that little ease of mind.
Yeah.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, man. This is another edition of Two Jews, One Podcast. I'm happy to have you here.
Oh, man, the images. And us with our beards.
You're with luminaries Sean Crystal and Alice Darrow from,
wow.
So look, you're in good company.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great company to be in. I'm honored.
So there's a bunch to talk about, but honestly, like your record label and your history with not just comedy records, but your history with music in general is fascinating to me. And I wanted to start by asking, I know when you were a kid, you have a very, very interesting family history, but I know you were a kid and you were very much taken by Israeli comedy, which is something I know nothing about, even though, I'm a Jew, but that doesn't mean I know anything about Israeli comedy. Give us a little introduction into that.
I'm not gonna perform any of it because it's in another language.
Sure.
So we'll start with that. But my mom and dad emigrated from Israel
Hmm.
in the late 60s. Dad came over first, got like himself established a little bit, then brought mom and my brother over. Uh, and in between that, like my dad getting here and my mom getting here, there was a war over there. So that was part of the reason dad wanted out,
Hmm.
was he'd already lived a full life of war. But
Right.
my mom, in coming here, she loves music. She loves comedy. My mom's a big fan of the arts and of not gossip rags, but like celebrity type things. And all
Sure.
of that was kind of thumbed into my brain at an early age, you know. And if you're a kid and you have a stay-at-home mom, whatever mom does is what you wind up experiencing. So my mom would put on these records, some of which were like singers like Tom Jones or Engelbert Humperdinck or
Hmm.
whatever was popular at the time. And then some stuff was like Israeli folk songs, and then comedy from Israel, which was it was a group of comedians. In English, it's called the Pale Hunter, but they were basically Israel's Monty Python. But
Hmm.
we're talking early to mid 60s, and all the way up through one of them, I think, passed away 15, 20 years ago. So a lot of Hebrew was sort of a dead language,
Yeah.
and then Israel comes along and they didn't want to live off of being Holocaust survivors with a language tied to that. So the usage of modern Hebrew really began to emerge in the years leading up to Israel. And as a result, it was like a dead language that was being revived. Uh,
Hmm.
only really in Bible stuff before that, and then modernized. And in that modern idiom, things needed to be figured out as to how everything was said and the grammar and even slang and sayings and
Sure.
and this sketch comedy group was very, very foundational in establishing a lot of Israeli ironic thinking, and a lot of their phraseology is still very much in the know of. It'd be like saying candygram here. You have an equivalent of that there. You say
Okay.
candygram, and everyone knows it's the land shark. Well, they have things like that over in Israel that were tied to this group.
It's interesting because, like, I grew up in New York, so I grew up around the most Jewish Americans that could exist on the planet at that time. I mean, that just listening to my mom and her mom talk, and you understand where this comes from. But we're separated by about a decade in age, and that's a huge world of difference when we think about influences, right?
Yeah,
My comedic influences growing up are, we share Mel Brooks, but mine are Weird Al and Leslie Nielsen, and then into the MTV stuff, Beavis and Butthead, Ren and Stimpy. But for you, I know Mel Brooks, obviously, as a Jewish person, we are extremely influenced by him with our senses of humor. But is there anything that you can point to as well that really gives you that sense of loving comedy? Like, I can imagine you're a big Mad Magazine fan as a kid growing up.
absolutely. Like Mad Magazine was very, very foundational to me. When I was a kid, I grew up out in the East Coast, and I was born in Massachusetts. Didn't live there long, but I lived in New Jersey for 6 years. I
Mm.
lived in the Poconos for another 6 years, and then we moved out to the middle of Nebraska. And that kind of was rough, but if I hadn't had the humor from Mad Magazine and all the stuff growing up in the East, all the Sesame Street, seeing Benny Hill
Yeah.
reruns all the time, and just WOR and WPIX and all the movie marathons and pro wrestling and all the American junk culture stuff. I just tops trading cards and you go to a newsstand in New York City back in the day, and every subject had two magazines, the
Hmm.
authority and then the knockoff. And sometimes they had more than that. And you would just it was a world of color no matter where you looked. Everything was illustrated. Movie posters were, done by Jack Davis and Drew
Yeah.
Struzan, and that's the kind of influence I had, was all of that crazy, colorful personas like George Gobel and Paul Lynde on Hollywood Squares. It was just this crazy mishmash of stuff. The Muppet Show, you name it.
Hmm.
That's a lot of that all went into the hopper for me. And then Marx Brothers movies, uh, you know, Saturday Night Live, I started watching from the time I was like 4 or 5, because my parents would drop me off at my aunt's and then go out with my godfather, and they say, don't let him stay up late. And then the next morning I'm reciting monologues and sketches. And
Yeah. Yeah. You're like knocking on the door, Land Shark.
yep, 100%, all of it, the Killer Bees, you name it. I remember so much of it just dumping into my head.
Yeah, me and my brother used to watch SNL because our parents would go out on Saturday night because my mom's a teacher, so her
Okay.
weekends were extremely important to her. And yeah, I mean, reciting Wayne's World, I grew up with Myers and and Dana Carvey and those guys, and it's the same thing. With the next day, I'd be joking around in the car, like pretending I was Toonsis the driving cat or something. you know and it sticks with you. And I mean, I think me and you, from what I know about you and from what I know about you from talking to you,
Yeah.
is that we were both kids that just were vacuums, and what we do in our lives now is because we were vacuums back then, and we get to instead of suck, we're on full blow.
Well, in comedy, full blow could mean a whole
That's
other
true.
set of backroom payments and stuff. But yeah, no, it really was taking in everything and trying to absorb that love. And yeah, this is me basically trying to put out my version of stuff
Hmm.
back into the
Yeah.
world. Not necessarily for any kind of reward, but just to be part of that continuum.
Yeah, to keep it going. I mean, to keep the cycle of good comedy going. Do you remember any specific stand-up comedians? Did you see any when you were young, or did you get to experience any of that in person as a young person?
As a youth, not really. We moved to Nebraska when I was
Right.
11,
Ah,
and we lived 3 hours from any real, the biggest city in the state, and 2 hours from the second biggest city. So, like, there wasn't a lot. It was all TV at that point, and then sitting
sure.
with friends and trying to make friends laugh. So I remember, like, my best friend and I, we would record fake radio station like we were DJs, and we'd record it on a boombox and just fill cassettes with us just babbling. And like, it was just all filters of trying to make something funny based on something funny you saw or heard yourself. And
That's
the HBO stuff was really influential to me
sure.
early on in the 80s as the rise of stand up on cable went. That's where I went.
Yeah, yeah, I got to experience that. We had HBO when I was somewhat young, so I'd see Carlin, I'd see Def Comedy Jam when it started. I'd see a lot of that stuff. It's funny. I mean, maybe we are distant cousins because like 10 years, 10 years later, whenever you were doing the thing with the boombox, I was recording parody songs because that's my comedy. As I grew up, I listened to Weird Al, and I have a quick tongue and I can think of things. You've seen me do it
Yeah.
literally. And yeah, I have tapes of me recording nursery rhymes and like with metal verses and really bad obscene words. And my SAT prep classes, no, it was just me rewriting lyrics to songs. That's all it was. I hated SAT prep class.
Yeah, I was
uh,
not a fan myself.
so I know you said you grew up in Nebraska for the most part. Your music taste is where kind of you start with recording and producing and all that stuff, and it's punk. Can you give me some of your early musical influences and maybe like your first experience at a punk show? Because Nebraska's definitely got a punk scene.
It's got a punk scene, but my first musical, like, experts in my life were my cousins Morris and Helene, who had a pretty great record collection. So when I lived in the East Coast and we would go to New York, the maximum we ever lived away from Manhattan was about 3 hours. So
Okay.
we were there a lot. not weekly once we got to Pennsylvania, but when we were in New Jersey, we were there weekly.
Oh yeah.
So having them buying all these records and playing them was like the biggest influence. And then my cousin Morris started making me cassettes. So TDK tapes with like London Calling and Blondie and Squeeze and the Rolling Stones and you name it, like all sorts of great stuff that I'm not even remembering everything. Like, all that stuff was really my very first musical influence. And it was everything from Paul Revere and the Raiders to Kiss to Peter, Paul and Mary to the Beatles to, the Clash and the Ramones. All that was through their record collection.
Mm-hmm.
And then hip hop was, they lived in the Bronx. So like they weren't far away from some of the stuff as it was developing. They weren't in the South Bronx, but they were not far from, not far from a lot of main sites in the hip hop history if you start reading. And just having it be in the atmosphere was something I absorbed. And when I moved to Nebraska, even though it was 82, like it was already going and you could hear it. And, Rapture was becoming a hit as I was moving, I think.
Yeah.
So that became another element into things. And then I went to college and started going to big shows like Def Leppard and Van Halen. And it was through being interested in that stuff that I stumbled into the fact that there were local bands, which was a concept that it just didn't compute. Like local bands that wrote their own music, like cover songs is a different story. But once I read about that in the college newspaper, so that'll tell you I was like 17 when I went to college. So probably I was 18 when I figured out that there were bands in the area. And then I just sort of fell into it and really, I always like the weird alleyways that kind of peter off and go into distance and they aren't the main path. So I kind of pursued it and sort of became an expert. And then I was booking bands at the university as part of the program council. And then I was working at a record store. So then it just sort of kind of all came together where if I'm buying records from a distributor, maybe they'll buy some records from me.
There you go. And that's how you get somebody a little distribution that maybe you have faith in, that you like.
Bingo.
So, I mean, it's interesting. I know there's some association with you and Slipknot. So let's hear about this. I mean, I'm not the biggest Slipknot fan, but goddamn, Corey Taylor's got a hell of a voice.
This is before Corey.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I had a dear friend named Matt, and Matt and I used to road trip to see bands, and we would party like a couple of demons just because, we're two young dudes and going to see bands in other places and taking time off work and just like, let's have a good time. So we wound up taking a road trip to Des Moines because the band The Humpers was playing and then Unsane was playing the next day. And one of the dudes in the Humpers was a former Lincoln musician that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see him and his new band. And then Unsane, I'd already seen a couple times and was super, super into it because what I like about punk is the aggression.
Sure.
I'm a metalhead too. So like, I don't like every aggressive thing, but when something's over the top, it moves me in a way that I can't really describe as a fat guy in my 50s at this point. When you're in your 20s and you have a head full of steam, it makes a lot more sense.
Of course.
So we were in Des Moines for 2 days. We missed the Humpers because we had the time wrong. It was an all ages show. We got there when it was over. So we hung out and drank at the bar and got to know the bartenders. And then the next day we saw Unsane and I was introduced to the bar owner and the guy said, bartenders tell me you have a record label. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I have a band I'd like you to hear. I said, okay. And then he slides me a CD and it's Slipknot's Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat, which is before Corey. It was demo. There's 1,000 copies of it. So he goes, listen to this and tell me if you're interested. So we listened to it on the way home and it was not like anything I was dealing with on my label. It just was. They were more hip hoppy back then and more experimental. And they sort of smoothed out a couple rough things when they signed to a bigger label, but I really liked it. So I called and it was basically the dude I was talking to who owned the bar is Sean, the clown, Slipknot. and we came to a deal, and I distributed the rest of the CDs.
Jeez.
So I am not the person that recorded them. I'm
Right.
not the person that first discovered them, but I'm one of about half a dozen, maybe 10 people that put them on a map.
Right. That helped get their name out there
I'll
by
get their
getting that
name out
CD
there.
out there.
Well, I got that CD into the Best Buy system,
Oh,
and it
wow.
blew out very, very fast, fast enough to get them attention.
How do you think the word got around once it got into the Best Buy system? Like you're watching stuff like this happen at a ground level, and you don't really hear the stories anymore of how a band goes from like a CD getting out there and then becoming this thing that people want, and then they be, like they get demand. I mean, the last thing I can think of where there's a real story is the South Park creation where Clooney gets it out to all these people, and then next thing you know, we have South Park.
Well, there were a lot of elements going on. The studio that they recorded at was getting word out there. Now, I don't
Mhm.
have all of this 100% down. So the people out there that really know the history, like full detail, might be able to nitpick some stuff out that I don't have in my head as part of
Mhm.
my picture. But the studio people were beating the drums. They had a manager who was from Lincoln, which was part of how the deal came through. And she was a big metal station like promo person. So
Okay.
she had a lot of ears too. And they were getting a lot of placements in Des Moines. Like Des Moines has a long metal history of
Hmm.
craziness. That's where Ozzy bit the head off a bat. Rest in peace, Ozzy.
That's
Um,
right.
but that is also like where Les Claypool got hit in the head by a pig's hoof provided by one of the band members that I know from Ritual Device. And there's a lot of weird things metal wise that happen in Des
Mhm.
Moines, and one of those weird things is Slipknot itself. So at the time, they had a different singer. A lot of their song lyrics and content was based on this board game about werewolves that I can't remember the name of, but it's easily looked up. And the singer Anders Kolsefny, he was just a madman, like shaved bald, like big muscular dude wearing a lot of bondage gear, and then like wrapping his head with a weird pattern of electrical tape, so that like very thin electrical tape but like in strands, so you could see a lot of his face, but it was just like this weird torture bondage. It was it was not of this earth and very, very cool. And
Wow.
stuff, it was just a funkier band. I mean, it all locked in once they signed and did Iowa.
Mhm.
And I think, was that the first one? No, the first one was Slipknot, the self-titled one.
Yeah, but Iowa was the one that blew up.
Yeah, but those guys, they were. I mean, when you're listening to bands, it's very clear. Even a punk band, it's very clear the difference between what an amateur band is and a professional band. And when that gear shifts, it's it's shocking how good it becomes. And
Yeah.
Slipknot was doing that.
Yeah, and then they just went on to just be, what they are now. I mean, they grew and grew, and good for them. I mean, they came out of a place that didn't really have much recognition, like on the broader map of music. So your first record label is called ISM, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I called it ISM because it stood for in spite of myself, which was the reason I got up in the morning. Yeah.
And that was you kind of just signing, was it a lot of bands that you just personally wanted to see them get out there, and then it kind of just went on from there?
Yeah, the very first band I worked with, Such Sweet Thunder, they were a band that I was a real fan of and became sort of like an on again, off again road crew member. I would help them load gear in and out of shows, and then I would help book shows for them at the university. So that part of things was where that started. And then from there on out, I didn't really sign bands. I just sort of would find people, and then we'd come to a handshake, and I would do a distribution deal with them. And through that, that's how we kept going. And the one record, that Such Sweet Thunder record, did really, really well. So it kind of fooled me into thinking that this was something I could do and actually make money at.
Right.
And out of the 60, 70 records I put out on that old label, um, I think five records were successful.
All
And
right. I mean,
And in those days, success meant we sold out of copies. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to make more. We're out. They're done. They're gone. You didn't get it. Tough shit. Next record.
I mean, that also really, as we know, as you know, purveyors of the secondary market, we know what that means. They end up, if they ever become something, or they even go on to make 4 more albums, that first album becomes a valuable thing and a hard thing to get.
Yeah, very much so. And out of all the 4 or 5 records that were successful, only one of them became valuable.
Well,
One is sort of on its way, but
yeah, yeah.
not Slipknot numbers.
How long did you have? And then you changed the name of the label to Issimist. Is that
I did. There was a punk band in New Jersey called ISIM, and one of the dudes became a lawyer, and he sent me a
oh,
letter saying you have to stop using this name.
the
So
least punk thing you could ever do to somebody?
I thought this is perfect. This
Yeah,
I hope you can wipe your butt with your ideals.
yeah.
Um, and so I got that letter, and I was putting out a record for Wisconsin band Killdozer, who were on Touch and Go. I was putting
Mm,
out the final single for their last tour, and this happened like in between when we got the records pressed and when we got the covers made. So the records still say ism, but then the covers say ISIMIST because I decided I'm already committed to using this name for this record. So I can be in spite of myself, in spite of them.
Issimist, in spite of myself, in spite of them.
And there's a ton of, I have layers and layers because like an ist is a follower. So it literally has to be ism is first. After it was all this crap. So like I thought and thought and thought, and that's what I came up with. From there on out, I moved to Minnesota in 98. And then I started commuting and listening to metal on the way to work. Howard Stern on the way to work, metal on the way back. And then on that commute, I heard that Lewis Black from The Daily Show was going to be here in town. So I then went to the comedy club with a stack of CDs and I wrote a note and I handed it to the usher. And I thought, well, at a rock club, you never see the band afterwards. If it's a big
Right.
band, they're gone. So I figured it was an Elvis left the building sort of thing. And then I walk out of the club and you walk by a glass wall where there's a bar. And I look in that glass wall as you're walking by, you can't help it. And there's Lewis Black standing in the middle of the bar. I'm like, well, screw this. I'm going to go talk to him. My parents taught me when I was a kid, if you're petting a dog, you don't pet the tail, you pet the head.
Right. That's
So,
great advice.
yeah. I mean, so that's what I did. I went and talked to him. I asked if he'd gotten the package of stuff, and he said no. So I explained who I was, and I would like to work on a record with you. And he said it was funny because Comedy Central had just said no to him. They didn't have a record label at that time.
Yeah, but
So
he was their guy at that time, though.
he was, but they started their label 2 years after I started.
Mm.
So moment machine got in there, and we recorded. That was in March of 99. We recorded right before Thanksgiving in 99. And the record came out in June of 2000. And then that became the most successful record on ISIMIST because I hadn't started the new label name yet.
Okay.
I basically put out 4 comedy records before I realized, I should just rebrand.
Right, because anybody who wants to say Ismist or look at it will probably have a problem saying it until they get it right. Versus Stand Up Records isn't even a. I mean, maybe for some people it's hard to read it, but for most people, that's 3 easy words to say.
Bingo! I learned my lesson. Every one of my failures led to some success later.
That's boom. That is amazing because it is something that I harp upon that. I also, my version of that is like everything that I began as a joke ends up turning into something real. A lot of the things that I do kind of start out as a joke. Getting original art of Darth Jar Jar turns into 15 pieces already, and a zine coming up, and then the character of Comic Tim, which has been running for over 2 years, was just like something that came out of my mouth as a joke, and all of the names that I use for things, West Coast Wednesday, and all these things, they're just jokes and they end up being real. So I understand it's like, you learned from your mistakes. You also like put something out there that you may not be serious about. You do it once or twice and you're like, oh wait, I am serious about this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, run a comedy record label now. I mean, I was doing punk stuff, man. What the hell is going on?
Well, I mean, what's more punk in the performing world than comedy?
Well, I would say Karen Finley and her performance art stuff might be.
Fine.
If you wanna somehow
Exceptions.
stuff a whole can of beans somewhere improper, then I think you have the very punkest job in the world.
So let's jump into the label Stand Up Records, which has over. Are you past 200 releases yet, or you're somewhere
250. Yeah.
250, 250 releases? Some of the names that people might be familiar with: Mark Maron, Lewis Black, Maria Bamford, Patton Oswalt. Did you do? Did I see? There's a couple of deceased comedians that you have.
I worked with Mitch Hedberg for Comedy Central. That's one deceased comedian. Mike DiStefano from New York is on my label. Sean Rouse was on my label. LaShonda Lester. I can't even think of 250 releases. People check out sometimes.
Yeah, that's a lot of releases to remember.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's 25 years.
Wow, that's
So
impressive, though.
it's a little bit bonkers. I didn't expect this to be the thing. This When I started ISM, it wasn't like it was a paying gig. I was working really crap jobs and eating a lot of ramen. Eating a lot of ramen. There was one time in my music label years where my adjusted income was $8,000
Wow,
for a year.
wow,
So
that's crazy.
yeah, I mean, comedy just fluked and right place, right time, and it took off. And it took off in a way where I was smart enough to dig my heels in and make a name for myself through the recording quality and through who I worked with that it endures. And I don't know that with everything, all the craziness now, who knows? You know,
Sure.
people don't really seem to think that albums are things you buy really anymore.
Yeah, I lean a little bit of disagreement because physical media is really strong in certain ways, and they're trying to push it away.
100%. And that's really the thing is, the industry tries to push it away, and then the press goes, downloads are selling out better than CDs are. And it's like, well, people go, well, downloads are selling better than CDs are. Why would I buy a CD?
Right, right. And but then you have, the people that are really pushing sound quality, people that are really pushing like the fact that streaming services altogether at any point can just say, "No, it's gone. We're
Well,
done."
they did it to comedy a couple years ago. There were a
Yeah.
couple of labels that tried to promote that they were going to collect rights that don't exist. And they sold a whole bunch of comedians on it. And the
Mm,
comedians just say, more money, sure, I'll sign with you. And they don't think about anything. But what this other company was trying to do was it would have taken an act of Congress to do what they want.
Jesus.
And there was no act of Congress. So they started suing all these places like Pandora. And Pandora just started removing comedy from everything, as did other people like Pandora. So then that when they removed all comedy from everything, that means they removed all my stuff too. So that was a crazy, crazy fight. And I'm still dealing with some of the repercussions of that. It's just part of the crazy way that media is shifting.
But the thing about records, and I've heard you say, I mean, I have a decently large record collection, and
Me too.
it's something that I really push and pull between because I've moved across the country, and every time you move, you're just like, I'm not fucking dragging these records around. But it's nice to have a physical. We grew up in a physical media life, and I think people that are probably in, like I would say, the 20 to 35 age gap are starting to realize that they're missing out on it. And DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs. I mean, shit, tapes made a comeback.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I've even done not only cassettes, but I've done 8 tracks and I've done reel to reel.
Wow. You're
Yeah.
just going for it all.
I like the crazy, weird, like I told you, I like going down that alleyway and
Hmm.
turn. I like all that crap. So that's always what appeals to me.
So with the label, you've been doing this for 25 years. Um, and there's so much to talk about it, but kind of simplistically, what have you seen in stand up that's changed in the last, let's just say 5 to 10 years? Because it feels like stand up is completely different than what it was, 5, 10 years ago.
I
Maybe not.
think I think a lot of it's being this is going to start getting a little weird and technical, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of it is the internet is affecting things and the
Mhm.
gamification of, trying to make an algorithm bend to your will and come to you. And if the algorithm reacts to heckler videos, which I think are kind of worthless,
Yeah.
um, then everyone starts doing heckler videos because they're trying to get their stuff to go viral. And at that
Mhm.
point, you're not really pursuing comedy as a pure art anymore. You're pursuing eyeballs and gamifying the system just to get more thumbs up. And that becomes a substitute for the actual emotion of responding to a
Yeah.
comedian. A comedian should be like a jazz musician in reality. You go, you see it live, you experience it at that show, and you experience the magic of them appearing to make you all laugh and fall in line and act as one. But every heckler video, not only does it disrupt what the comedian does to make more heckler videos, it disrupts the show because every asshole like us, like you doing Comic Tim or me like making fake radio shows, that spirit comes out of like, I want to be part of the show. And it's like, you're not part of the
Sure.
show. You're just you're the paying, just because you paid to get in doesn't mean you get to talk. You
You don't get the narrative
No,
to be
yeah,
about
you
you.
have to go see what that artist is presenting. You don't go to see Glenn Ross, with comedians in it, and then I'm part of the show. I'm a salesman.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't. I mean, and it's depending on the comedian you're going to see, you might end up being part of that show just by sitting there. I mean, I got Todd Barry
Yeah.
once and I got David Crossed once, and it's amazing. It's great. Like you're so embarrassed, and at the same time you're just like, "Oh my god, this is
Was it
hilarious."
was it the hipster tattoo thing that they came after you with?
Barry, there was 4 of us sitting at a table close to the stage, and one of my friends was wearing a fedora, whatever I was wearing, and we got called Apple Store employees. It was
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah, I mean, I
hilarious.
can almost picture,
Yeah.
I Todd and David both I know a little bit, so
Yeah, they're great at what they do, and the bigger shows are a different story. I've seen Gervais in Madison Square Garden. I've seen Sandler at Radio City, and like those are just shows. Those are like you are there to laugh, and but yeah, I see the heckler thing, and I'm like, yeah, this is. I mean, it's people feeling entitled and wanting to be at the narrative. It's one thing you're at a concert and there's a quiet part and you yell "Freebird" and someone tells you to fuck off. Like that's great, but that's pick your spot, not interrupting.
100% I agree with that. If you notice, if you go back and watch any of George Carlin's HBO specials, people try to derail him. You hear it in the audience. It never cuts to the audience. You just
Right.
hear George. He doesn't even let it phase him. He just somehow, like a magician, steamrollers every single thing coming from the audience. Like you can just tell that there's that New York City, fuck you. This is my time. I'm doing my time. Nothing is going to stop. A bomb could go off and I'm going to still tell my joke.
And he was the best.
And
He was the best.
you asked earlier, what my earliest comedy show was. I was 17 years old. I was in Vegas with my parents, and George Carlin was playing at Caesars. And it was a 21 and over show. And my parents
Ah,
said, here's $20. We're going to go out and see our shows. Go to Circus and play arcade games, do whatever. And I'm like, I'm 17. I'm going to go see if I can actually. I'm 4 years too young. I'm going to see if I can get into this George Carlin show. And I went over to Caesars and I bought a ticket, and they never carded me. And I got in line and they never carded me. And they seated me and they never carded me. And they asked my drink order and they never carded me.
fucking Vegas.
Man, it was the greatest night of my life at that point.
I can
And I
only
got to see
imagine.
George Carlin in person for the first time. So I was 17 when I got to see my first real comedy show. And
Wow.
I saw George 3 times, and the third time I thought I was going to get to meet him because I was a guest of his manager. But I brought all sorts of stuff in case, and nope, he hopped in a limo and flew back home by the time I got backstage.
Ah, well, at least you got to see him 3 times. You know, it's
Yeah.
that's a special thing. Speaking of, is there anybody that you like that you're kind of dying to work with? Somebody that you'd love to record that you're a fan of? Because obviously you're a fan. Like you're like me. We're doing this because we love the thing, whatever it is, the industry, the comics, or the comedy in your,
Well,
in your world.
the funny thing is, I've already worked with a lot of the big people.
Hmm.
So I don't really, I don't know that I have a want list of like the big names at this point. Yeah, I don't think I do because either I've already worked with them or they've done something that like I wouldn't want to work with them at this point, or
Hmm.
they've passed on. Like I'd love another crack at working with Hedberg, but like
Yeah.
that's never going to happen. And I don't. Not to say that I wouldn't be happy to work with any of the big names I already have worked with. I don't really have a new guy that's like getting to that level where it's like, oh, I gotta work with them. For me, it's about the discovery of a new
Hmm.
artist, and it takes 10 years to become a new artist, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You
So,
got to take
like,
your bumps.
yeah, you got to take all your bumps, and it's 10 years in before you're ready to present. So it's like that's the point I like to be at, is at that roughly 10 years, 7, 10 years in, and helping somebody like push over the top from there because they've already got a voice and they've got something they want to say. And on that level, my main guy right now is a guy near you in Olympia named Sam Miller. And
Hmm.
I love that dude, and he's great, and he has an interesting story, and he's just super goofy. He basically he's 6'6", so he's like built like a lumberjack, but he sounds like Tommy Chong, but he's like not a pothead. He's a recovering meth addict with a wife
Right.
and kids and a family life, and like his head screwed on straight. It's just like this real interesting story, and he's just really eager to push and to work with me on some of the stuff that I'd like to see done.
Hmm.
It's easy. I like more people like that where it's easy to get behind what they're doing because
Right.
there's positivity there.
And I'd love to go see him one day. I know you recorded some shows with him recently, and
Yeah.
hopefully we get. Are those going to be on Netflix, HBO?
Well, that's always the hard thing about the modern day is everything's streaming everywhere, and it's impossible to open up the big doors. So the new special that we filmed a little bit ago is still being worked on and color corrected and edited, and stuff's being eliminated that we don't think works, and color I already said, and soundtrack,
Hmm.
just there's a whole ton of tweaks that have to happen. Once that happens, we're going to start knocking on doors again at the
Okay.
Netflix. And I'm talking to my attorney about it a little bit now. My distributor, I'm a little disappointed with. Video distribution, even though you would think that people have been selling videos, on VHS and stuff for 40 some odd years, it's basically still the Wild West.
Jeez.
And the digital world of it makes it even crazier. Like it's impossible to get a real release date that actually gets stuck to. Like I
Hmm.
define a release date like 4 months in advance, and then it's like, is it coming out on that day? Who knows? The distributor
It's
can't tell me.
the weird world of media these days. Is it just gets weirder and weirder?
It's insanity, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. These should all be like the most basic, concrete answers. And that's the part I don't like, is that the foundation is washed away.
Hmm.
So on the business side of things, on the creative side, there's always going to be like an audience to pull. There's always going to be somebody to tell jokes to.
Of
But,
course, there's always going to
but
be something to make fun of it yourself.
yeah, yeah. And in the meantime, making fun of those things doesn't get you put in some kind of weird relocation. We'll call it that.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough. Fair enough. um, Lastly, I think I want to talk about this, and next time I have you on, we're going to talk about comics a lot and
Yeah,
art.
please.
But I do want to talk about one thing that you did about a year ago, right?
You
These
know,
came out about a year ago. For those of you that don't know, this is what is typically this is a parody of a chick track. Do you want to explain what a chick track is, because you have more of the history of that
absolutely.
in your head?
A chick tract is basically using the comic book idiom as propaganda to push evangelical Christianity onto unsuspecting people in passing. So this particular format was developed by a guy named Jack T. Chick, and that's why they're called Chick Tracts. But he had his own printing press, and he printed these things by the millions, and that drove the price of them down to next to nothing. And as a result, he could sell them very cheaply to people who would then buy them and distribute them in public restrooms and telephone booths when we had those, and all these
gas stations,
truck stops, any place sort of seedy and used by everybody, and just not like wallpaper. You see it and you don't even realize it's there sometimes. But once you take notice of it, you really take notice of it. Evangelical tracts are so virulently hateful that they hate not only Muslims and Jews and atheists and Dungeons and Dragons, but they also hate Catholics.
Yes.
Like severely. And this is all like, it's all been used by the religious right to kind of get their way and bully and push and pester. And I decided to really study up on this stuff. And there's a few books and a documentary. And then I really took like what I thought were some of the finer points of them and made a checklist of what I wanted to hit as points. And then I approached, there's a local comedian and comic book author, Elliot Rahal, here in Minneapolis. And Elliot and I talked, and he loved the idea, and he took all of my stupid notes and he made an actual story out of it. And it's a really good story.
It's good. Yeah, I enjoyed this thoroughly.
And then he brought on artist Jack Kotz, who's also a Minneapolis artist. And here we are. I found a printing plant here in town. The evangelicals wouldn't print something making fun of them.
Of course not. They have no sense of humor to begin with.
Right. And like in all these religious tracts, whenever they show Jesus or God, they never show a face because you're not supposed to have a graven image. That's one of the biblical laws that they kind of perverted. You're not supposed to have a graven image of the deity, kind of like you're not supposed to draw Muhammad.
Right.
So, no one's ever made that parallel in public. I've now drawn ire from two sides. I like the dotted line thing. So when I told Elliot about it, I said, we got to have God and his head's got to be a dotted line, but it doesn't have to be a human head. I would like it if it was an elder god, so we have like a dotted line headed Cthulhu god on a human body.
Good. It's so good.
Yeah. And we have all these messages that are like not positive, but are still funny. And they're like, there's like talk of suicide. And I say, don't take pills and commit suicide because you're sad. Take drugs because they're fun.
Yeah. It's a great twist on something that is, like you said, it was built from the ground up to be hateful. And this is life's a joke. And it really does stay true to its name. And, me and you, I've shared, like stores I've gone to that I've seen it. And I watch you, posting on Instagram where you're dropping them off. And, they're in Excalibur Comics as we speak in Portland. And if you want to send me some, I can get them at least in Stargazer, because I gave all the ones out that you had originally sent me because because I knew if I throw them in with people's orders, they're going to enjoy it. Like I know the people that would enjoy looking at those.
I can send you a bunch and you can do whatever you want with them, honestly, because the idea is to get them out there. The other idea about this was not only to make fun of Chick Tracts, but as Chick Tracts proselytize to bring people into evangelical Christianity, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring people into stand-up comedy and go to an open mic and try writing a joke. So that's really kind of what the whole point was to twist the whole thing on its head. And I have another one that's pretty much done, but I printed 5,000 of these, and I want to get rid of a few more before I make another 5,000 of something.
Yes. Yeah, we can't be all Jack Chick. And I mean, that dude probably had a lot of money coming in from so many different sources, whether it was evangelicals or it was, whatever religious cult.
100%. I don't have that. And in fact, I try to half-ass sell them on my website, but like, it's not even really the point. The point was to advertise the record label. So like a mail order that comes in gets a copy.
Right.
And even if they order one of those, then they get two of them.
By the way, for anybody that's listening, you can find all of the things that Stand Up Records does at standuprecords.com.
And all of our social media is at Stand Up Records, I think.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah. And next time we do this, we're going to get into it on so many levels, because I am actually like fascinated by production and like the idea of what a producer does in, in different ways. And also I want to talk about comedy, and I want to talk about comics, because those two things are very much intertwined throughout the history of both of them.
Well, I'm always this from the late hours that I'll write you. I
Yes.
like just talking to people that I respect, peers, because if you got something going on, it's interesting to me. And it keeps
Hmm.
my fire going because I'm still hoovering up stuff. And it's not, I don't want to be you. I don't want to sell comic books online, but I'm very interested in what you do. And I'm a customer. I like buying
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and I don't want to do that forever. I want to do this forever, but there's got to be a way for me to support myself.
100%. And I think
You
it's
know,
awesome that you found this avenue in the meantime as you're getting toeholds and everything else.
yeah, yeah, and like you, I'm a talker, and I like listening, and I like asking questions to hear the stories they have to tell, because it's, I think, one of the reasons why we're drawn to comics in general is because they're stories,
Yeah.
and they're stories from very creative minds. Sometimes not so creative, but mostly creative. Um, anything immediate coming up that you want to promote, releases, or show, or anything like that?
I'm working on a vinyl release for mystery comedian Dick Davey from the 1960s. That'll
Hmm.
be out in September. Dick Davey was a white dude who sounded like a black dude from the
Hmm.
South. And there's a whole mystery about him because he made two albums in the 60s. The first one was recorded at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, and
Wow.
and then he kind of disappeared. So comedian historian Cliff Nesteroff tasked my fellow producer Jason Klom with the task of figuring out who Dick Davey was, and
Huh.
he pulled at threads until he got the whole thing to come out as a story. And this record is a couple of unreleased acetates and a live performance from a TV appearance in 1968,
Hmm.
like a 20-page or 16-page booklet telling the whole story, and art on the cover and on the cover of the booklet by Tony Millionaire of Mockies. And
Oh yeah, and Sock Monkey.
yeah,
Wow, that's
so
awesome. Yeah,
yeah, I think that'll appeal to the audience.
sweet. Yeah, I like a little history lesson, and something that we don't know about. I mean, I feel like comics did that. What was the Fantagraphics one that they did, that and Jim covered it, the guy
Oh,
who
the
made
big
that?
big book, the Frank Johnson, was it?
Yeah, Frank Johnson, like
Yeah.
somebody that nobody knew anything about.
Yeah,
And
yeah, he wound up being like this. He just writing in isolation for himself.
mhm.
I can't remember the other artist who did that with the girls. I can't think. But it's one of those undiscovered things where like the guy dies and they're going through his stuff and about to dumpster it, and they find like hundreds of pages of art.
Yeah, it's wild. And there's
Yeah,
probably so much of that stuff that'll, has been out there, will be out there, or and will never get discovered. So, keep putting good art out there. It can't hurt. It can only help the cause. And the cause is, enjoying life a little bit more.
100%. And I think that's the main thing is we all have a one-way ticket here, but you might as well die laughing. Like
Oh, I
don't
definitely will.
don't don't let it go away in all seriousness and gloom and fear and all the crap that's being forced down our throats from the general public. Like life is fun. Have some fun even during all the crap. And that's the best revenge is living well.
Exactly. And also I'll add to that, life is also a joke. Life's a
Absolutely.
joke. Well, Dan, look, thank you for being here. I definitely want to have you back on. I definitely want to have you back on so we can just talk about the things that we love.
Yeah,
Stand up records across the board. You can find Dan on social media, and you can find him maybe recording your next favorite comedian. And maybe, it'll be live on wax at some point.
absolutely. And remember, everybody, West Coast Davengers.
Woo! Thanks for listening or watching. If you are watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you can watch it all over the place now. It's amazing. The website for the podcast is pretty easy. It's directeditionpodcast.com. You can rate and review this on Spotify and Apple and Amazon, or just, hit the like button on YouTube and drop a comment down below. Once again, thank you so much to Dan for doing this, and also for his patience with the internet that we are all subjected to, no matter where we live, no matter who we are. So thank you again to everybody involved in this. But let's just let you go. You come back next week. We got another interview. You can hear my nasally voice. And so I'll see you on the next episode of Direct Edition. Have a great week.